Dublin, the heart of Ireland, a city rich in culture, history and unmistakable Catholic roots. Yet, amidst its cobblestone streets and historic landmarks lies an unsettling truth. Dublin, a city with a Catholic majority, has no Catholic cathedral to call its own, while its less than 4% Protestant population has two massive cathedrals. How could this happen? How could a city so deeply tied to Catholic identity, one where the majority of its people have clung to their faith through centuries of oppression, lack a Catholic cathedral? The answer lies in a dark and turbulent past, a history of conquest, oppression and betrayal. A history where loyalty to one's faith often meant a lifetime of suffering, while betrayal brought wealth, power and survival. This is the story of how a city's faith was systematically suppressed and its soul reshaped by those who ruled it. This is the story of why Dublin, the Catholic heart of Ireland, has no Catholic cathedral, but a temporary one till date. For centuries, the grand cathedrals of Dublin stood as symbols of faith and community for Irish Catholics. But with the Protestant Reformation and English conquest, these sanctuaries of worship were taken from the people they were built to serve. St. Patrick's Cathedral and Christ Church Cathedral, two of the most iconic religious landmarks in Dublin, were seized and turned into Protestant places of worship. This was no mere act of convenience, it was a deliberate statement of dominance. The Protestant ascendancy, empowered by English rule, sought to control not just the land, but the very soul of Ireland. The conversion of these sacred spaces was a stark reminder that Catholics, the majority of Ireland's population, were now second-class citizens in their own land. If the confiscation of churches was a symbolic blow, the Penal Laws were the systematic dismantling of Catholic life in Ireland. These laws stripped Catholics of their rights to own land, seek education, or practice their faith freely. They were forbidden from building new churches, and any existing Catholic chapels had to be inconspicuous, constructed of wood and hidden from public view. These laws didn't just marginalize Catholics, they made the existence of Catholic institutions nearly impossible. Every brick laid for a Catholic church was an act of defiance, risking persecution and financial ruin. The penal laws ensured that Catholicism remained stifled, its followers impoverished and its institutions barely surviving. The oppression wasn't limited to laws and cathedrals. It reached into the daily lives of Catholic farmers who were forced to pay tithes to the Protestant Church. This meant that even as they struggled to survive under harsh economic conditions, they were financing the very institutions that oppressed them. These tithes were more than just a financial burden. They were a bitter symbol of subjugation. Every payment reminded Catholics that their labour enriched the Protestant minority while their own faith was left in the shadows. Resentment simmered, fueling a legacy of tension that would shape Ireland's history for generations. For many Irish Catholics, survival in a society ruled by the Protestant ascendancy came at a steep price: their faith. Conversion to Protestantism was often the only path to economic security, social status, and political influence. Families who switched faiths found themselves suddenly able to own land, access higher education, and climb the ranks of society. The Popery Act of 1704 even incentivized this betrayal by granting inheritance rights to the eldest son of a Catholic family if he converted to Protestantism, leaving his siblings and parents impoverished. Some of Ireland's most prominent families owe their rise to this calculated decision. These converts became part of the Protestant ruling class, their loyalty to the new faith rewarded with land, titles and power. Yet their wealth and influence came at the cost of severing ties with their heritage and community. The rewards of conversion were undeniable, but the price was steep. To their former communities, these individuals were seen as traitors, people who abandoned their faith, culture and shared struggle in exchange for personal gain. Their names became synonymous with betrayal, often spoken with bitterness and resentment. For Irish Catholic identity, this phenomenon left a deep scar. Each conversion chipped away at the collective strength of the Catholic majority, reinforcing the dominance of the Protestant ascendancy. It planted seeds of distrust and division within communities already struggling to survive under oppression. Ultimately, these betrayals served as both a survival mechanism and a stark reminder of the lengths to which the oppressed were forced to go in a system designed to strip them of dignity, unity, and faith. St Mary's Pro-Cathedral stands as a poignant reminder of Dublin's fraught religious history. Officially designated a Pro-Cathedral, it is a provisional or temporary cathedral, highlighting the Catholic Church's inability to reclaim its rightful place in the heart of Dublin's religious landscape. This designation is not accidental. It is symbolic of the centuries-long suppression and marginalisation of Catholics in Ireland. Unlike the grandeur of St Patrick's Cathedral or Christchurch Cathedral, St Mary's is modest in scale and appearance. These Protestant cathedrals, seized from Irish Catholics during the Reformation, were maintained with the wealth and power of the Protestant ascendancy, reflecting their dominance over Ireland's social and political structures. St Mary's, in contrast, was established in the early 19th century after Catholic emancipation began to ease restrictions on the faith. Yet, even then, Catholics were denied the opportunity to reclaim their historical cathedrals. The result was a church that served as a practical solution rather than a triumphant reclamation of Catholic heritage. The pro-cathedral status serves as a quiet yet powerful symbol of the ongoing legacy of oppression. It underscores that while Catholicism has endured and even thrived in Ireland, it has never fully recovered the physical and symbolic spaces lost during centuries of Protestant rule. The contrast between St Mary's and the Protestant cathedrals is a stark reminder of how power and faith were wielded as tools of control in Ireland's turbulent past. This historical divide is not limited to Ireland. In Scotland, the Reformation brought sweeping changes that marginalised Catholics and suppressed their faith. In cities like Edinburgh and Glasgow, Catholicism was driven underground as Protestantism became the state religion. Catholic worship was not only restricted but often criminalised, forcing adherents to gather in secrecy for fear of persecution. Education for Catholics was another major battleground. Laws prohibited Catholic schools, leaving many families with no choice but to send their children to Protestant institutions or forego education entirely. This systemic suppression aimed to erode Catholic identity and assimilate the population into the dominant Protestant culture. The Reformation in England marked a significant shift as Catholicism was outlawed and replaced by the Church of England. For centuries, Catholics were forced to practice their faith clandestinely, often in hidden chapels or private homes. The risk of being discovered could mean imprisonment, fines, or worse. This marginalisation persisted until the Catholic Emancipation Act of 1829 began to loosen restrictions. Even then, it wasn't until 1903 that Westminster Cathedral, the mother church for Catholics in England and Wales, was finally completed. Its delayed construction reflects the slow and arduous journey of Catholics regaining a place in English society after centuries of exclusion. Irish Catholic migrants who moved to Britain in search of work during the 19th and 20th centuries faced not only economic challenges, but also widespread discrimination. In cities like Manchester and Liverpool, they were met with hostility and prejudice, often labelled as inferior and untrustworthy due to their religion and heritage. These migrants were frequently relegated to the poorest neighbourhoods, working the most dangerous and low-paying jobs. Anti-Catholic sentiment fueled social tensions, and Irish Catholics were often scapegoated during periods of political and economic unrest. Despite these hardships, they formed strong communities, building churches and schools that allowed their faith and culture to endure. The policies of suppression and marginalisation left an indelible mark on both Irish and Catholic identity in the UK and Ireland. In Ireland, the forced displacement of Catholicism from public life fueled a deep-rooted sense of injustice and resistance. The scars of confiscated churches, imposed tithes and legal restrictions remain woven into the cultural memory, shaping Ireland's collective narrative of struggle and resilience. In the UK, the legacy is one of fractured relationships between Catholic and Protestant communities. Even as laws and attitudes evolved, the historical divide left lingering tensions, particularly in Northern Ireland, where sectarian violence erupted during the Troubles. The echoes of these divisions still resonate today, albeit in subtler forms, in political discourse and social dynamics. Yet, there have also been steps toward reconciliation. Modern Ireland and the UK have seen growing efforts to bridge divides, from joint community initiatives in Northern Ireland to the Catholic Church's increased visibility and influence in the UK. These examples of reconciliation, while promising, coexist with reminders of the past, ensuring that the legacy of division remains a critical part of the cultural and historical landscape. As we highlight these issues, it's important to point out that while Irish identity has been tied to religion for hundreds of years, Ireland has been losing its faith. And Ireland, a nation whose identity has been tied to Catholicism for centuries, is undergoing a profound transformation. Once regarded as a bastion of faith, the country is now seeing its religious adherents steadily decline. The numbers tell the story. In 2011, 84% of Ireland's population identified as Catholic. By 2022, that number had dropped to 69%. Meanwhile, those identifying as having no religion increased from 6% in 2011 to 14% in 2022, signalling a growing trend towards secularism. Mass attendance, once a cornerstone of Irish life, has seen an even more dramatic decline. In the 1970s, over 90% of Irish Catholics attended weekly Mass. Today, in urban areas like Dublin, that figure is as low as 10 to 20%. Social changes further reflect this cultural shift. In 2015, Ireland became the first country in the world to legalise same-sex marriage by popular vote, a decision that went against the strong opposition of the Catholic Church. Just 3 years later, in 2018, a referendum repealed the Eighth Amendment, which had constitutionally banned abortion. 66% of voters supported the repeal, showcasing the country's move toward progressive values. This erosion of Catholicism in Ireland raises important questions about Ireland's evolving identity. As the younger generations embrace a more secular, progressive society, what will happen to the legacy of faith that once defined the nation? Is Ireland stepping into a new era of secularism, or will its religious roots continue to shape its culture in ways both seen and unseen? The story of Dublin's missing Catholic cathedral is more than a historical anomaly. It is a testament to the cost of faith-based oppression and the moral compromises imposed by a system built on dominance and exclusion. For those who clung to their beliefs, the price was poverty, persecution, and exclusion. For those who converted, it was the heavy weight of betrayal, a trade-off of faith for survival and prosperity. This complex history raises a profound question for all of us. What would you have done in their place? Would you betray your faith to escape hardship, or endure the suffering for the sake of your beliefs and community? The answer is not easy, but understanding this history is essential to appreciating the resilience of the Catholic faith in Ireland and the UK, and the enduring lessons it holds about power, identity, and the human spirit.